Welcome to the very first episode of the Next Chapter Book Club Kids Edition. Today we'll be speaking to Rachel Brace, a psychologist at Relations Space in Sydney. Rachel helps families, including adolescents and children, navigate the complex process of separation and divorce. Rachel is also a children's book author, and she's written Max's Divorce Earthquake and Harriet's Expanding Heart. Thank you so much for speaking with us today, Rachel.
Hello.
My first question is, how do children experience divorce and separation?
Well, I guess it's loss. It's a big, overwhelming loss. In many cases, it's the loss of daily access to a parent, it's the loss of the family unit, and it's the loss of the only life that they've ever known.
And does it make a difference if the parents separate amicably without any high conflict involved?
In terms of loss experienced, no. In terms of some of the other feelings that kids might experience in that situation, it can help temper them, it can help ease the intensity of them. Generally speaking, in that first period of separation, there's a lot of sadness, there's a lot of confusion, there's a lot of grief. At other times, kids might experience anxiety, anger, relief, then guilt because they're feeling relief. It's a wide variety of emotions at any given point in time. But the thing that is completely unavoidable is grief.
And how do different children in the family experience these emotions differently, or do they react differently to divorce?
Yes, because there's so many variables that come into play. There's age, there's temperament, there's personality. There's no one way to grieve. There's no one way to feel loss. There's no specific time frame to do it. So there's no guarantee that kids in the same family or kids in different family are going to feel the same things at the same time for the same reason.
So when we talk about divorce, we often talk about a divorce story and the importance of having one. In your experience, what does that term mean, to have a divorce story, and just how important is it for children?
It's exceptionally important. I guess as human beings, we're meaning-making creatures. Whether we're aware of it or consciously or unconsciously, we're always making sense of the world around us. We're always getting new information and revising our own life stories, and we're reflecting and reviewing past experiences and things that have happened to us and updating our story as we go. Children and adults alike do that. And when we separate, or when families separate, or parents separate, I should say, and families break up, kids and adults are going to make sense of what's happening around them to make sense of what they're feeling and what they're experiencing in that moment. So a separation story, divorce story, or a story of separation, they're all terms that are used somewhat interchangeably, is the account that parents give their children to help their children make sense of the changes that they're experiencing in their family and in their day-to-day life. The reason that it's really, really important is because if kids aren't given an account that is age appropriate and helpful for them, and that helps them make sense of their world, they're going to make something up. And what they make up, because of the fact that they're kids, is likely going to be quite self-referencing. Children perceive the world around them from a very self-centered way.
That's the whole world that's just been turned upside down. So I can imagine when they're dealing with complex emotions like grief, to not have any reference point there, would it be fair to say that they would blame themselves, they would carry a lot of emotional burdens that aren't theirs?
Yeah, absolutely. So if kids aren't given an explanation that makes sense, so it's got to be informative. It can't have too many details, and it's got to be age appropriate. So what you might give a 2, 3 or 4-year-old a story of separation is going to be different and less detail orientated than what you might give a 6 or 7, 8-year-old or a 14 or 15 or a 16-year-old. Where children aren't given a story that helps them make sense and they make their own up, they are likely to make a story that somehow it's something that they've done, that they are the causation of the family fights or the family turmoil or the parents' decision to separate. And that's going to leave them carrying a great deal of guilt, of sadness, of blame, those are some pretty big feelings for kids to carry around, and that is then going to either distract them from more age-appropriate activities, such as learning to read or learning to write or forming friendships or playing soccer or learning, at school. And it's also going to impact on their self-esteem and their self-confidence, feeling that you are the reason that your family has broken up and your parents are not speaking. It's an awfully big emotional burden for young children or for any child to carry, and they are just not emotionally equipped to handle that.
They are some huge emotions that you've just touched on there for children to experience. If a parent is listening to this and thinking, oh my God, I've stuffed it up, I haven't given an account of why I've separated from the child's parent, or I just haven't done it very well, is there any hope in terms of rewriting a divorce story?
Absolutely, there is always hope for doing that, and it depends, I guess, on what the parents do from this point onwards. Once they realise that perhaps they haven't given their child an adequate explanation of what's happening, and by adequate I mean child-focused. They don't need all the dirty details. They don't need all the adult issues. They don't need the adult explanation or the adult's divorce story.
And the two can be quite different.
Yeah, absolutely. An adult's divorce story might involve betrayal. It might involve loss in terms of cheating. It might involve family violence. It might involve many other issues that as adults we know the complexity of relationships, and relationships are hard work. From a child's perspective, a separation story might be more about mummy and daddy have been fighting lots. We're no longer making one another happy together, and we have decided to live in different places. We love you very much. You are the most important thing to us. You're still going to see lots of both of us, and we're still going to take care of you in the way that we always have done. But daddy's going to be living at grandma's for a period of time, and you and mummy are going to be living here in this house. That helps them make sense of that. If a parent suddenly goes, oh, haven't given them an adequate story, it's okay to go back to your kids and say, you know what? Mum and Dad couldn't find a way to make our problems work, and we're really sorry. We've made some mistakes, and those mistakes have hurt you, and we're going to endeavour to do better moving forward. We're going to do better at making it easier for you to love both of us, because I know how important your dad is to you, or I know how important your mum is to you. It's all about repairing the ruptures. It's all about acknowledging the child's emotional reality of what has happened, and thinking about, as a parent, what you can do differently from that point on to make sure that your child is well shielded from the conflict, if there is conflict, or shielded from the adult distress that is inevitably going to be present. Because it's not just kids that feel big feelings when divorce happens.
So how important is that idea of repair in any child-parent relationship, whether someone's going through a process of separation or divorce or not? How important is it, just in regards to normal everyday parenting?
It's crucial. It is impossible to be attuned to your children 100% of the time, and what makes a good enough parent or a good parent or a great parent is a parent's ability to recognise when they're misattuned with their child and their child's needs, or when a rupture in that relationship happens, and then being able to repair, to offer a way to reconnect and to reattune with a child. Divorced families or intact families, that's always an important part of making sure that you have a warm, safe, secure connection with your child and a relationship that makes them feel loved and valued.
And how important is it for a parent to recognise when their own divorce story is colliding with that of their child's?
Crucial. And it's crucial because we know that divorce has a negative impact on child wellbeing. It can have quite an impact on their mental health. And there are factors that will increase the risk to a child's ongoing development and their mental health, and being exposed to parental conflict, being exposed to significant levels of parental distress, such that a child might then take on some responsibility for trying to either fix mum and dad's problems or fix their marriage or to make them happy, then again, impacts on a child's ability to be a child and to do the things that a child should be doing, and focusing on their own mistakes and learning the skills that they need to develop in terms of resilience and things like that.
Children experience what you've called a huge amount of grief when their parents separate and that family structure breaks down. That's a really big ask for parents to have to support their own children when they might themselves be feeling immense sorrow, grief. We speak about betrayal if there's been an infidelity or whatnot in the relationship. It's a huge emotional event that's taken place. How can parents best support their children and the child's mental health and development when they're going through this period?
By taking care of themselves, by recognising their own emotional experiences may be different or likely are different from what their kids are experiencing in that moment. And for making sure that they don't assume that their children are feeling the same way about the ex-partner or the family breakdown. And in that way, making sure that they're utilising their support persons, that they are talking to people and have other adult support people, that they're not relying on their children to meet their emotional needs in that point in time. If they're able to do that, then they're going to be able to shield their children from hopefully the worst of the divorce and the separation. They're going to be able to shield their children from conflict. And that's really crucial. Even in the most amicable of separations, in that a period of separation, so in the lead up to the separation and then while parents are untangling their lives as they knew it, there's going to be heightened emotions. It's unavoidable. And parents are human. They make mistakes. And in dealing with those big emotions, there are likely going to be times when maybe they do or say things that if they were feeling a bit stronger and a bit more resilient, they wouldn't. So it's really important to keep the adult stuff and the adult feelings away from the kids so that parents can then support children in their emotional experiences of the divorce and the separation.
As a lawyer, I often see orders, for example, that restrains one of the parents or both parents from speaking in a very bad way about the other parent in the presence of the children. I just want to get your views on how successful you think, practically speaking, is an order like that.
I think an order like that is really hard to enforce, but I think what those orders do is hopefully bring a parent's attention to the fact that they shouldn't talk badly about the other parent to their children or in front of their children, that they shouldn't allow other people and other family members to do so, that they shouldn't blame the other parent for the divorce or separation, even if they really think that that person is to blame, that they should continue to make it easy for children to love both parents and have access to both parents. Children are, after all, half mum, half dad, or half both their parents. And to hear a parent talk negatively about their other parent, who those children inevitably love and value, is going to make them question the part of them that resembles that parent or that is like that parent. So those types of orders, I think, while the enforceability, I think, is questionable, if anything, they do draw a parent's attention to the importance of keeping that type of stuff away from their children.
And in your experience, is there ever a gap between orders such as the one we've just spoken about and the practical impact on that? For example, can kids pick up on any other cues that their parents might be giving out, even though the parent's not explicitly saying, oh, your mum or dad is an idiot, or saying other unkind things in front of the child?
Yeah, absolutely. You think that behaviour is a form of communication, and non-verbal cues make up a great deal of the way that we communicate to the world around us and to people within our world. So it's not just the verbal words that parents are saying, it's the tone of voice, it's their demeanour, it's the eye rolling perhaps when they see the other parent arrive at a pickup, it's sighing when the other parent says something. It's sometimes the implied criticisms that parents can make in a general conversation. It's the non-verbal cues can sometimes have a more powerful message for children and can sometimes be a lot more confusing for children if they have a parent that's saying one thing verbally, but their non-verbal cues are giving a completely different message. For young children, that can be very, very confusing and can add to their feelings of sadness or whatever big feeling they might be feeling in that moment, because their world's just not making sense to them. So parents need to be mindful about what they do when they get a text message from another parent, when they're writing an email to that parent, the way, well, old school slamming down a phone, it's a little bit harder with an iPhone to hang up aggressively, but it's the parent that is perhaps at a changeover saying goodbye to a child and saying you'll be all right, but holding them exceptionally close and crying as they say it. All behaviour is communication, and parents need to be as mindful of their non-verbal cues as they are of the words that are coming out of their mouth.
And I think that's a huge aspect for parents to consider when they're going through that process of separation and divorce. What are some other things that you wish as a psychologist, especially a psychologist that deals with adolescents and children going through this exact scenario, what is it that you wish parents would know?
There's so much. I guess the most important thing is that kids inevitably love their parents, flaws and all. And post-divorce, they need stability, they need security. Kids do better when they have more people that love them. They do better when they have healthy relationships. They do better recovering from a divorce if they're able to maintain a good enough relationship with both of their parents and their caregivers. And if parents are able to put their children's needs first, to love their kids more than they hate their ex-partner, they are doing their kids an amazing service in that regard. They need to make it easy for kids to love both parents, irrespective of about how they might feel about that parent as their ex-partner.
And as an author of 2 children's books, how important is that role of storytelling in supporting parents and children when they're going through this process?
Books, I'm a bit of a bookworm, and I think books have an amazing way to allow us to talk to our kids about really sensitive subjects like death or divorce or separation. Books are a way that can help create a connection or a conversation between parents about those difficult subjects where a parent might not know where to even start when discussing some of that stuff. So I think books are easily accessible, so you don't need to be a skilled therapist or a psychologist to read a story with a child. You just need to have the right story and a little bit of time, and of course to be able to read. And in that way, it can help explain difficult concepts to children. It can help expand a child's vocabulary. And if they are able to read and they have a building on the words that they can use to express themselves, they're more likely to be able to ask for help, to be able to ask for support. They're more likely to let their parents or the other people in their lives know what is going on for them. And in that way, books are a really, really good way to spark the imagination and to develop resilience.
I just want to turn now to this beautiful book, Harriet's Expanding Heart. Now, this is the newest book that you've written,
Yes.
and that deals with the concept of blended families and some of the emotions and the experiences of children when they're in that setting, that new family unit. I just would like to know your thoughts on the role of step-parents in that process of storytelling, not only about a divorce story, but storytelling in general with children.
Look, I think any adult, step-parent, parent, auntie, uncle, anybody that's able to sit down and to read with children is doing both themselves and their children a benefit. Parents are time poor. There's a lot of stuff going on, and in terms of step family formation, it's a nice way to try and connect with your stepchild, and it's a nice thing to do. We call it a shoulder-to-shoulder activity. So talking like how you or I are talking can be quite intense for children. Sitting next to them and doing a shoulder-to-shoulder activity where your focus is on the book is a nice unintense way to engage with a child, to connect with a child, to build a bond with a child. And most children enjoy having some one-on-one attention with an adult that is focused on them. And if they're reading a book that they enjoy or are reading a book that they can connect with, even better.
My 10-year-old still loves me reading stories to him. He loves to come, he sits exactly what you've just described, either shoulder to shoulder or tries to still sit in my lap at 10 years old, which is getting a lot more difficult. What is it about the magic of the parent's lap that children, and even at 10 years old, they're still attracted to it? What's the magic behind that?
It's safety and security. It's warmth, it's affection. It's something that fosters connection and a shared experience. And when you're reading a book that you both enjoy, it's creating moments of engagement, of conversation. Your imagination can take you anywhere. Reading is fun, or reading should be fun. And in that way, it's an activity that you're both getting some enjoyment of. And that's awesome.
Well, I want to turn now to the first book that you wrote, Max's Divorce Earthquake. Can you tell me a little bit about how you came up with the idea and why you wrote it?
I wrote it. There are a lot of really good children's books out there, and there are some books that touch on the topic of divorce and separation. But I found a lot of the books are written by American authors, so they use mom instead of mum, and they have an assumption that children are living primarily with the mother and maybe spending time with the father. And a lot of those books talk about the process of divorce and separation and what to expect. In my work as a therapist and working with the children and family who are going through divorce and separation, I really wanted a book that looked at the feelings and emotions associated with divorce and separation without telling kids what was going to happen or how it was going to happen or how they might feel about it. I wanted a book that just covered the range of emotions, and I couldn't find one.
Well, what I love about this is that this idea of an earthquake, because you really drill home, at least as a parent, that's what I picked up on, the fact that at times that's exactly what it must feel for children when their parents have separated. It is an earthquake. It disturbs everything. And I like the idea that an earthquake can come and it can go. And I think you've tied down really nicely in the book the experiences of children and their emotional responses that may also come and may also go. Things like, for example, Max felt like there was an erupting volcano in his chest. And then it goes on to talk about things like anger, and then it moves on to grief and things like that. Why a dinosaur, though?
The dinosaur was the illustrator's idea. So one of the challenges in writing a book is giving over a little bit of creative control to the illustrator. And Angela is an Italian lady, and she read the story and was thinking of a way to represent an earthquake and the shaking. And she came up with a dinosaur, and I loved it.
And what I love also about using a dinosaur is it's accessible, it's inclusive, you can concentrate on the story more so than the actual pictures or the characters.
And it's a visual representation of shaking. Like most kids imagine dinosaurs to be larger than life animals. And when they walk, there's that sense that it's shaking the world around them. So, to imagine an earthquake and having a visual representation of how the earth might be shaking, I think can work quite well in this situation.
And what I love about Harriet's Expanding Heart is that really deals with what struck out for me is that idea of being an outsider within your own family. So can you talk to us a little bit more about that experience or that feeling that children may have when they're in the blended family?
I think insider-outsider roles affect everyone in a step-family situation, and they can be quite fixed. And by that I mean for the biological parent in a step-family situation, they're fixed in the role because they have a shared experience with their child that predates their relationship with their partner. And their relationship with their partner has evolved largely away from their children in many respects. So they're stuck in an insider role between them and their partner, and then an insider role with them and their child. For children, if they're only living in a house part-time, or they're popping over every other weekend or 5 nights a fortnight, whatever the arrangement is, family life in that home continues even when they're not there. And for some children, their step siblings are spending more time with their biological parent than what they are. So a child coming into that home that's already been functioning for maybe 9 days without them comes in, and there might be rituals or routines that aren't necessarily familiar to them, or they're seeing their parent engage with a step sibling and they're feeling left out. In that sense, it sometimes feels like you're a stranger in your own home, and it takes a little bit for them to warm into that or to find their role and to insert themselves in family life in general. And for any of us walking in on something and not knowing how to join in or feeling left out is not a comfortable feeling. And for kids, it can also bring up feelings of jealousy, of rejection, of abandonment. And again, those are some pretty big uncomfortable feelings for kids to manage on a regular basis because they're coming and going between their two homes.
So how important is it then for changeover for children emotionally? So we know as parents logistically and as lawyers logistically what we need to do to enable a child to come into the care of the other parent. But emotionally, what would a great changeover look like for kids?
It'd be smooth. It would be quick. And it would have sensitivity on behalf of the parent. So, you know, a parent that's saying goodbye is managing that in an emotionally sensitive way. Child is moving into the other parent's care, and then that parent is welcoming the child into their home in an emotionally sensitive way. And having low expectations of everybody, but in particular a child at that point in time. I like to refer to it as emotional jet lag, when a child has to readjust from, say, home with parent A, moving into home with parent B. There is a little bit of emotional jet lag that happens as they have to kind of recalibrate themselves into life with that parent, because inevitably there might be some different rules, some different parenting styles. They might be going from a home where they're an only child into a home where they're one of 4 or 3 children. They might be going from a home where there's no pets into a house where there's cats and dogs and rabbits. So there's a lot of adjustment that has to happen for children, and they need a little bit of time to kind of get into that way of life with that family.
Thank you so much for speaking with us. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
No, I think we've covered it.
Thank you, Rachel. And the books are Harriet's Expanding Heart and my favourite, Max's Divorce Earthquake.